So my job is, I think, to comment on what I've heard. And do you know what happened at the very beginning of this? I was, as you do at the beginning of a talk like this, maybe concentrating a bit too much on my own notes and so on. And all of a sudden, I woke up. And the reason I woke up was because I suddenly heard about mobile Vikings. Oh dear, I said, my goodness, I come from a part of the world that 1,000 years ago had experience of mobile Vikings. And they were searching for new markets, ladies and gentlemen. And they had very interesting and new ways of trying to persuade their clientele. And the clientele didn't always want to be persuaded. And one of the reactions of the clientele was to build very high structures. And then they put the doors of those structures 15 meters above the ground. And the reason for that was that they didn't want to actually have to be persuaded face to face. And when you think of it, ladies and gentlemen, that was actually innovation in a certain way. But I do get the impression that the way that indeed the Baltic area now is thinking about marketing and innovation is more persuasive. Anyway, a couple of things that I've taken away. The first is the very, I think, important work that's being done by the priority area innovation. And here I have to say thank you very much to Lithuania and to Sweden for really pushing this. I think you've really begun to change mindsets. And I think, let me pick out two. The first is what the title of this particular seminar is, which is bringing business to the environment. And I think, I mean, it's pretty clear that's already starting. It's to a certain extent, it doesn't always need stimulation. I mean, listen, look at where we are. And I think, I mean, it may not be completely out in the nature and so on, but there's clearly, obviously, things that people are interested in leisure and nature. They're interested in being in good environments and so on. And this is a sort of a hint of that. It may not be the complete package, but it's certainly a hint of that. So there's big business opportunities already in what we want to do in our leisure time. Active sports, all the different things that we all do. I think we're very clear about that. But then there's the other thing, things like organic products, and the fact that very often I think all of you are more interested in being able to buy organic products, bioproducts, and so on. So there is a market for this, and so business opportunities are starting. I think, though, the thing that's happening here and that you're working on, if I understand it rightly, is that these business opportunities meeting the environment, they do often need impulses. And that's why you're involved in it. And whether that's in relation to energy matters, for example, where it's pretty clear that you have to have certain tweaks of public policy in order to move towards more sustainable types of consumption of energy, or in a relation that's linked to it, the whole question of mobility. You do need public policy. You do need certain impulses in the system to be able to move towards the business really seeing its opportunities in the environment. And of course, there's the whole business we heard about, just disposal of waste and so on, where there are business opportunities, but the thing is that it does need certain injections in terms of what public policy says, or what's available in terms of seed money or certain financing and so on. And that's where we've got to be, I think, active. And that's clearly where this priority area and what you've heard from the panelists here has been particularly important, whether it's taking up the blue growth aspects that you've just been talking about, or the science links, or whatever it is. There's this need for the impulse. And the second thing that I think that this discussion, this priority area has been good at, and you've mentioned it several times, is the fact that you also, I think, benefit a lot from a cooperative mindset. So there's stimulating the business mindset, and there's stimulating the cooperative mindset. And I mean, I think that the benefits of this are, let me sort of take out a few elements. First of all, where are we? Well, here in Lithuania, I mean, certainly one of the things that I would associate Lithuania with is pretty strong scientific tradition. and education and so on. The other thing I would say about Lithuania and the neighboring states is that I think because you've probably gone through more change than other parts of Europe over the last 20 years or whatever, so you are probably more open to doing new things. I leave that, and maybe you can comment on that, but I rather suspect it's the case because people have been prepared to travel, to work elsewhere, they've been prepared to do new things, they've had to cope with different changing situations. So I think Lithuania, and by proxy, other countries close by, they have a strength there. What is another strength in the region is the other part of the partnership, Sweden. Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and these other countries, these are top countries in terms of what? In terms of research, in terms of innovation. And goodness, isn't this a partnership made in heaven? Well, I think it is. And I really think this is something that's, I mean, you can see other sorts of matchmaking that can go on around the region. So I think there's this cooperation, that's very good. And somebody else you talked about it, there's a whole question of critical mass. When you put everybody in the Baltic together, it so happens that you come up with, what's the figure in terms of numbers of people? 80 million. That just happens to be the same as the biggest country that's close by, Germany. But of course, that's one country. And Wolfgang, I know it's federal and I know you have your issues and so on and so forth, but it is easier generally to make rational decisions about where you invest and how the policies are developed if you're one country. I think the whole idea of the Baltic Sea strategy, the whole idea of priority area innovation is to be able to think much more in terms of 80 million together, critical mass and so on. And reference was made to Lund and the European Spallation Centre. Reference was made to, there's other types of these sorts of interventions here. You can only do that if you're talking about that sort of critical mass. So it brings me now to what I think you'd like from the European angle. What is it that maybe is interesting from the European dimension, this part? I talked about the Baltic Sea region part and the strategy part, but now there's the EU bit in front of it. So, well, I think that right now we're at an interesting moment because the way that the European Union works, it goes in these 7-year cycles. And 2014 to 2020 is a new cycle, and it's new in terms of policy, and it's new in terms of funding. And you might think, ladies and gentlemen, that with good planning, Europe was all set in November 2013 with all its plans carefully in place for 2014 to 2020, but you're not quite right, because the budget has to be adopted yet, next week, we hope. And quite a number of the programs still have to be adopted. So actually, the next 6 to 9 months are the hot period, because it's during that period that most of the funds, most of the programming, most of the funds will be really locked up in terms of what they can do. And there's where we want you in. I'm pointing to you, and Lithuania, and people that you know in the policy-making side, so that it can influence the programming. And the other thing is then, in terms of the types of projects that are going to come out of that programming and policy making. And I think that's really important, and I think that's why the folk up at this table are so crucial. Because you know what we do? In Brussels, we think, wow, we've got to have smart specialization. Wow, we've got to have innovation. But we're not really sure. We know how to build bridges, more or less, or whatever, but we're not really sure what this innovation thing is. So what do? We talk about it. The more times we say innovation, the more times we think we've done it. And in fact, what we need to do is to make sure that the ideas of these folk up here and the ideas from yourself are really feeding in. And I think really, I'll close on the one point that I think is so important. Innovation, of course it's about science. Innovation, of course it's about technology. But innovation, of course, it's also about much wider things. And in a sense, there's so many new things in the way we've organized our society, maybe particularly in relation to the green aspects. I don't know, mobile bike schemes in cities. I mean, that was hardly high tech. We'd have bicycles for 150 years or whatever. We've had cities for a long time. We couldn't work that out, but finally we have. And it's that sort of innovation which we also need to factor into the system. And I do think that that's where you come in, and that's where the folk here come in, and that's what we need to make sure it's present in the European policy making, and above all, the European the programming and the project selection. So, thank you.